My family kicked me out of great-aunt's will, reading, "You don't deserve anything." Then the lawyer read my name and left them 2.7. I'm still shaking as I type this. What happened 3 days ago has completely destroyed everything I thought I knew about my family. I've been the family disappointment for as long as I can remember, but what they did to me goes beyond anything I could have imagined. Let me start from the beginning. I'm 24, and I've always been different from my twin sister Madison and younger brother Tyler. They're both what you'd call conventionally successful. Madison works in marketing for some big tech company. Tyler just finished law school at Harvard. Me? I dropped out of college after 2 years to pursue music production. My parents, especially my dad, never forgave me for that decision. Growing up in our house was like walking on eggshells if you weren't Madison or Tyler. My parents, David and Patricia, made it crystal clear who their favorites were. Family photos literally had me pushed to the back or cropped out half the time. When relatives asked about their children, they'd go on and on about Madison's promotions and Tyler's academic achievements, then awkwardly mention that I was still figuring things out. The music production thing wasn't just some whim, though. I've been obsessed with sound engineering since I was 15. Spent every dollar I earned from part-time jobs on equipment. My bedroom looked like a mini recording studio, which my parents constantly complained about. "When are you going to grow up and get a real job?" was basically my dad's catchphrase whenever he saw me, but I was actually getting somewhere. Over the past 2 years, I'd been building a client base, working with local artists, even had a few tracks I produced get some decent streaming numbers. Nothing huge, but I was making enough to pay rent on a tiny studio apartment across town and cover my basic expenses. My parents acted like I was some kind of basement dweller, but I was actually independent and slowly building something. The real problem started when my great-aunt Eleanor died 6 months ago. Eleanor was my grandmother's sister, this eccentric old woman who lived alone in this massive Victorian house about an hour outside the city. She was always the black sheep of the family. Never married, spent her life traveling and collecting art. My parents always talked about her like she was some kind of embarrassment, but I actually liked her. She was the only family member who ever seemed genuinely interested in my music. Eleanor left behind this huge estate, including the Victorian house, a collection of vintage instruments, and apparently some valuable artwork. The will reading was scheduled for last Monday. The whole family was supposed to be there. My parents, Madison, Tyler, a bunch of aunts and uncles, cousins, the whole crew. Here's where it gets insane. Sunday night, the day before the will reading, my parents called and asked me to come to dinner. This was unusual since they hadn't invited me to family dinner in months, not since the last time when my dad spent the entire meal lecturing me about wasting my potential. I should have known something was up when I walked into the house and saw everyone there. Madison, Tyler, even some extended family members I hadn't seen in years. The dining room table was set like it was Thanksgiving or something. Mom had made my supposed favorite meal, which was actually Madison's favorite, but whatever. The conversation was weird from the start. Everyone was being overly nice to me, asking about my music, pretending to be interested in my latest projects. Tyler, who usually acted like I didn't exist, was suddenly asking if I'd ever considered scoring films. Madison was talking about how artistic I was, how she'd always admired my creativity. I was confused, but figured maybe Eleanor's death had made everyone realize how important family was or something. Maybe they were finally ready to accept that I was taking a different path in life. After dinner, my dad cleared his throat and stood up. He had this serious expression that usually meant someone was in trouble. "I asked everyone here tonight because we need to discuss Eleanor's will reading tomorrow," he began. "That's when everything went to hell. We've all been talking," he continued, "and we think it would be best if you didn't attend the reading." I just stared at him. "What do you mean?" Madison jumped in, using that fake sweet voice she'd perfected in corporate training. "We just think it might be uncomfortable for you. You know how these legal things can be." "Uncomfortable how?" I asked. Tyler, my own brother, looked me right in the eyes and said, "Look, let's be realistic here. Eleanor's will is probably going to leave things to family members who've made something of themselves. It would be awkward for you to sit there while everyone else gets recognition for their achievements." The room went dead silent. I could feel my face getting hot. My dad nodded along. "Son, we're trying to protect you from embarrassment. Eleanor was always polite to you, but she knew you never applied yourself like your siblings did. She probably left you a few $100s or something small," my mom added, like she was trying to be comforting. "There's no need for you to waste your day sitting through hours of legal proceedings for that." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My own family was disinviting me from great-aunt Eleanor's will reading because they assumed I wasn't important enough to inherit anything meaningful. "You're not serious," I said. My uncle Robert, Dad's brother, spoke up from across the table. "We're just being practical. Eleanor's estate is significant. There will be discussions about property, investments, art collections. These are complex adult matters." "I am an adult," I said, my voice getting louder. My cousin Jennifer laughed. "Barely. You're 24, and you make beat tracks in your bedroom. I have my own studio and paying clients," I shot back. "A few local rappers paying you a couple $100s isn't a real business," Tyler said dismissively. Madison put on her concerned sister act. "We're worried about you being there when the lawyer starts discussing six-figure inheritances and property transfers. We don't want you to feel left out." That's when I realized what was really happening. They weren't trying to protect me from embarrassment. They were trying to protect themselves from having to share whatever Eleanor left with the family. "Failure. You're cutting me out," I said quietly. "Nobody's cutting you out," my dad insisted. insisted. We're suggesting you stay home and we'll let you know if anything concerns you. Which it won't, Tyler added under his breath. I looked around the table at all these people I'd grown up with, people who were supposed to love me unconditionally, and saw nothing but contempt and greed in their faces. They'd already decided among themselves that I didn't deserve to be there. What if Eleanor actually left me something important? I asked. The table erupted in laughter. Actual laughter. My dad was shaking his head like I'd said something hilarious. Son, Eleanor was a practical woman. She's not going to leave her valuable assets to someone who dropped out of college to play with computers. She barely knew you, my mom added. You saw her maybe 5 times in the last decade. This was a lie. I'd actually visited Eleanor more than anyone else in the family over the past few years. She was lonely, and I genuinely enjoyed her stories about traveling the world. She'd often ask me to bring my equipment over and play her music I was working on. She seemed to really appreciate it, but apparently my family had convinced themselves that those visits never happened or didn't matter. I'm her great-nephew, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. I have every right to be there. Rights don't matter when there's nothing to inherit, Jennifer said, smirking. My Uncle Robert nodded. Eleanor's lawyer already gave us a preview. The bulk of the estate is going to be divided among family members who've demonstrated responsibility and success. That's Madison, Tyler, probably a few of the cousins who went to graduate school. What about the music equipment? I asked. She had vintage guitars, synthesizers, recording gear. Tyler laughed out loud. You think she's leaving you expensive instruments? Why would she do that? Because I'm the only one in the family who actually makes music. Making music and making money are 2 different things, my dad said coldly. Eleanor understood the difference. I sat there for a moment, looking at all of them. These people who'd raised me, who I'd shared holidays and birthdays with, who were supposed to be my support system. They were so confident that I was worthless, so sure that I'd never accomplished anything meaningful, that they were willing to exclude me from my own family's legal proceedings. Fine, I said, standing up. I won't go. The relief on their faces was obvious. We think this is for the best, my mom said, reaching over to pat my arm like she was comforting a child. You can focus on your little music hobby while we handle the grown-up stuff, Madison said, not even trying to hide her condescension anymore. I walked to the front door with all of them watching me. As I was putting on my jacket, my dad called out, "We'll let you know if the lawyer mentions anything for you. Probably just a small cash gift." Tyler added, "Maybe enough to buy some new headphones." More laughter from the dining room. I left without saying another word. The drive home was a blur. I kept replaying the conversation, trying to figure out when my family had decided I was such a complete failure that they'd literally exclude me from legal proceedings. When I got back to my studio apartment, I sat on my couch and just stared at the wall for hours. But then something occurred to me. I pulled out my phone and called Eleanor's lawyer directly. I'd met him once at Eleanor's house when I was visiting, and she was updating some paperwork. Nice older guy named Mr. Hendricks. "Hello, this is regarding Eleanor Patterson's will reading tomorrow," I said when his secretary picked up. "I'm her great-nephew, and I wanted to confirm the time." "Of course, let me check. What's your name?" "It's me from the music. Eleanor's great-nephew who produces music." There was a pause. "Oh yes, she mentioned you quite a bit. You're definitely on the list for tomorrow at 2 p.m. My heart started pounding. "I'm on the list?" "Absolutely. In fact, she specifically requested that you be notified directly if there were any issues with attendance. She was quite insistent about that." I thanked him and hung up, my mind racing. Eleanor had specifically wanted me there. She'd made special arrangements to ensure I wouldn't be excluded, and my family had tried to cut me out anyway. That night, I barely slept. I kept going back and forth between rage and hurt. Part of me wanted to just skip the reading and let them win. Another part of me was curious about what Eleanor might have left me. But mostly, I was furious that my own family thought so little of me. The next morning, I dressed in my best clothes, which admittedly wasn't much, just some dark jeans and a button-down shirt I wore to client meetings. I drove to the lawyer's office, my hands shaking the entire time. When I walked into the waiting room, my entire family was already there. The shock on their faces was immediate and obvious. "What are you doing here?" my dad hissed, jumping up from his chair. "I'm here for the will reading," I said calmly. Madison looked panicked. "We told you not to come. This is embarrassing." "For who?" I asked. Tyler stepped in front of me. "Look, just leave now before this gets awkward. You don't belong here." That's when Mr. Hendricks opened his office door. He was an elderly man with kind eyes and a gentle smile. "Ah, you must be the musician," he said, walking directly over to me. "Eleanor talked about you constantly. I'm so glad you made it." The silence from my family was deafening. "She talked about me?" I asked. "Oh my goodness, yes. She was incredibly proud of your work. She played me some of the tracks you produced for those artists. Remarkable talent." I could feel my family staring at me, but I kept my eyes on Mr. Hendricks. "Please, everyone come into the conference room," he continued. "We have quite a bit to cover today." We all filed into this big conference room with a long wooden table. My family clustered together on one side, leaving me to sit alone on the other side. The symbolism wasn't lost on me. Mr. Hendricks opened a thick folder and put on his reading glasses. "Eleanor Patterson's last will and testament," he began. "I want to start by saying that Mrs. Patterson was very specific about her wishes and spent considerable time ensuring everything was exactly as she wanted it." He started with some small bequests to charities, then moved on to family members. Madison got $25,000 and some jewelry. Tyler got $30,000 and Eleanor's collection of first edition books. Various cousins got amounts ranging from $5,000 to $15,000. My parents were left Eleanor's investment portfolio, which was apparently worth around $200,000. I sat there listening to all of this, watching my family members nod and smile as their names were called. Part of me started to think maybe they were right. Maybe I really was going to get some token amount and be humiliated. But then Mr. Hendricks paused and looked directly at me. Now we come to the specific bequest for Eleanor's great-nephew, the musician. Here it comes, I thought. A few $100s and maybe an old guitar. Eleanor was particularly detailed about this portion of her will, Mr. Hendricks continued. She wanted me to read her personal note aloud before announcing the bequest. He pulled out a separate piece of paper, and I recognized Eleanor's handwriting. To my dear great-nephew, he began reading. You are the only person in this family who ever visited me because you genuinely wanted to spend time with me, not because you felt obligated or wanted something. You listened to my stories, you shared your incredible music with me, and you treated me like a human being instead of just an eccentric old woman. My throat started to close up. I could hear shifting and uncomfortable murmuring from my family's side of the table. I have watched you create beautiful art while your family dismissed your talents. I have seen your dedication, your passion, and your kindness. You remind me of myself at your age, following a different path despite everyone else's expectations. The murmuring from my family got louder. While others in this family focused on impressing me with their conventional achievements, you simply showed me who you were, and who you are is remarkable. I was trying not to cry. I'd had no idea Eleanor felt this way. Mr. Hendricks continued reading. I know your family has probably tried to discourage you from attending this reading. They likely assume you're not important enough to inherit anything significant. They are wrong on both counts. My dad made a noise like he was choking. To you, I leave the Victorian house and all of its contents, including the music room with all instruments and equipment. I also leave you my art collection, my vintage car collection, and the remainder of my liquid assets after other bequests have been fulfilled. The room went completely silent. Mr. Hendricks looked up from the letter. The total value of this bequest, including the house, art, cars, and remaining liquid assets, is approximately $2.7 million. I think I stopped breathing. There's more to the letter, Mr. Hendricks said, putting his glasses back on. I hope you will use the house's music room to continue creating. I hope you will appreciate the art collection as I did, and I hope you will remember that someone in this family recognized your worth, even if others could not. My family exploded. That's impossible, my dad shouted, jumping to his feet. She was confused, my mom insisted. She was elderly. She didn't understand what she was doing. Madison looked like she was going to be sick. This has to be a mistake. Why would she leave everything to him? Tyler was staring at me with pure hatred. He manipulated her. He took advantage of a lonely old woman. Mr. Hendricks held up his hand for silence. I can assure you that Mrs. Patterson was of completely sound mind when she created this will. She updated it just 3 months ago, and I had multiple conversations with her about these decisions. She was very clear about her reasoning. What reasoning? My Uncle Robert demanded. He's a college dropout. According to Mrs. Patterson, Mr. Hendricks said calmly, he was the only family member who treated her with genuine love and respect. She felt that demonstrated the kind of character she wanted to reward. I finally found my voice. She really left me her house? The Victorian house, yes, along with everything in it. There's also a separate workshop building on the property that she thought you might convert into a professional recording studio. The room erupted again. My family was shouting over each other, demanding explanations, threatening legal challenges, accusing me of elder abuse. Through it all, I just sat there in shock. $2.7 million. Eleanor's house, a potential recording studio. Everything I needed to turn my music production from a struggling side business into something real. We're going to contest this, my dad announced. This is clearly the result of manipulation. Mr. Hendricks opened another folder. Mrs. Patterson anticipated that reaction. She specifically requested that I share these with the family if anyone questioned her decision. He pulled out a stack of photographs. They were pictures of me at Eleanor's house over the past 2 years. Me helping her with yard work. Me setting up equipment in her music room to play her new tracks I'd produced. Me cooking dinner with her. Me just sitting on her porch, talking. She documented every visit, Mr. Hendricks explained. She wanted evidence of the relationship you two had built. Then he pulled out something else. A thick folder full of printouts. She also printed out every email and text message you two exchanged. She wanted to demonstrate that your relationship was built on genuine affection, not any kind of manipulation. I remembered those emails. Eleanor had gotten an iPad for her birthday last year and was constantly texting me questions about how to use it. We'd email back and forth about music, about her travels, about random thoughts. I'd had no idea she was saving everything. She also provided this, Mr. Hendricks said, pulling out a USB drive, recordings of phone conversations where various family members complained about you, discussing how you were wasting your life and would never amount to anything. My family went silent. Mrs. Patterson wanted it on record that she disagreed with those assessments. I was completely overwhelmed. Eleanor had not only left me everything I needed to build my dream career, but she'd also made sure my family couldn't take it away from me. When can I see the house? I asked quietly. The keys are here, Mr. Hendricks said, sliding an envelope across the table. It's yours as of today. I stood up on shaky legs and took the envelope. This isn't over, my dad warned. We're going to fight this. Mr. Hendricks shuffled through his papers again. Actually, Mrs. Patterson Patterson included a specific provision about that as well. Any family member who contests this will forfeit their own inheritance and must repay any funds already distributed. She can't do that, Tyler protested. Actually, she can. It's called a no contest clause, and it's perfectly legal. I looked around at my family. These people who had spent my entire life making me feel worthless, who had tried to exclude me from this very meeting, who were now staring at me with a mixture of rage and disbelief. I need some air, I said, and walked out of the conference room. In the parking lot, I sat in my car and just breathed for a few minutes. My phone was buzzing with texts from family members, but I didn't look at them. Instead, I started my car and drove to Eleanor's house, my house, for the first time as its owner. The Victorian was even more beautiful than I remembered. 3 stories, wraparound porch, surrounded by old oak trees. I used the key to let myself in and walked through rooms filled with antique furniture, original artwork, and Eleanor's lifetime collection of treasures. The music room was on the 2nd floor, overlooking the back garden. It was filled with vintage guitars, a piano, synthesizers, recording equipment that was worth more than everything I owned combined. There was even a mixing board that looked like it belonged in a professional studio. On the piano, there was an envelope with my name on it. Inside was another letter from Eleanor. If you're reading this, it means everything went according to plan, and you're now standing in your new home. I hope you can feel how much love went into this decision. This family has never appreciated what makes you special. They measure success in terms of money and status, but I measure it in kindness, creativity, and authenticity. You have all 3 in abundance. Use this house to build the life you've dreamed of. Turn the workshop into the studio you've always wanted. Create music that moves people, and never let anyone make you feel small again. You were never the family disappointment. You were the family treasure, and I'm sorry it took so long for someone to tell you that. All my love, Aunt Eleanor. P.S. Check the basement. I left you one more surprise. I walked downstairs to the basement, which I'd never explored during my visits. When I flipped on the lights, I couldn't believe what I saw. The entire basement had been converted into a professional recording studio. Not just equipment thrown together, but a legitimate, soundproofed, professionally designed recording space. There was a control room separated by glass from a main recording area, vocal booths, and equipment that must have cost hundreds of thousands of dollars. On the mixing console, there was another note. I had this built for you 2 years ago. I was just waiting for the right time to surprise you. Eleanor. I sank into the studio chair and just stared around the room. Eleanor had been planning this for years. While my family was dismissing my dreams, she was literally building me the tools to achieve them. That's when it hit me. I wasn't just a millionaire now. I was a millionaire with a fully equipped professional recording studio in a beautiful Victorian house. Everything I'd ever dreamed of having someday was suddenly mine. I pulled out my phone to call my best friend Marcus, the only person who'd always believed in my music. But first, I noticed I had about 30 missed calls and texts from family members. The messages started apologetic. Dad, son, we need to talk. There might have been some misunderstandings. Madison, hey, I think we should all get together for dinner this week. Family is family. Tyler, congratulations on your inheritance. We should celebrate together. But as the day went on, they got more demanding. Mom, you need to think about what Eleanor really would have wanted. She'd want the family to stay together. Uncle Robert, that house is too much responsibility for someone your age. We should discuss selling it and splitting the proceeds fairly. Jennifer, you can't seriously keep all that money to yourself. What about family loyalty? I deleted all the messages without responding and called Marcus. Dude, you are not going to believe what just happened to me. Update 1. It's been 2 weeks since the will reading, and my life has completely changed. I've been living in Eleanor's house, my house, and it still doesn't feel real. Every morning, I wake up in this beautiful Victorian bedroom and have to remind myself that I'm not dreaming. I've spent most of this time exploring the house and getting familiar with the studio equipment. Eleanor didn't just leave me basic recording gear. She left me equipment that professional artists pay thousands of dollars per day to use. The mixing board alone is worth more than I used to make in a year. But the best part has been the peace and quiet. For the first time in my adult life, I'm not worried about rent money or whether I can afford groceries. I can focus completely on my music without any external pressure. I've been working on some new tracks, and having access to this level of equipment has elevated my work to a completely different level. I can hear nuances in my mixes that I never could before. It's like going from painting with crayons to having access to a professional art studio. My family, meanwhile, has been relentless. They started with the guilt trips. Mom called crying about how I was tearing the family apart by not sharing my inheritance. She kept talking about how Eleanor would be disappointed to see me being selfish with the money she left me. When that didn't work, they moved to practical concerns. Dad showed up unannounced last Tuesday, claiming he was worried about me, living alone in such a big house. He spent an hour walking around, making comments about how expensive the upkeep must be, how much I'd save on property taxes if I sold it, how difficult it would be for someone with no business experience to manage such valuable assets. You know, son, he said as we stood in the music studio, this equipment is just going to depreciate sitting here unused. You could sell it and invest the money properly. I'm not selling it, I told him. I'm using it. He looked around the studio like he was seeing it for the first time. Using it for what? Those little songs you make? Even now, even after everything that had happened, he still couldn't take my music seriously. Tyler tried a different approach. He came by last weekend with a folder full of legal documents, claiming he'd researched my options options for managing the inheritance. He suggested setting up a family trust that would give him and Madison some control over the assets to help protect me from making poor financial decisions. I'm not signing anything, I told him. You don't understand the tax implications of an inheritance this size, he insisted. You need professional help managing this. Then I'll hire professionals, not family members who tried to exclude me from the will reading. That's when his mask came off. Look, I'm trying to help you here. But if you want to be stubborn about this, fine. Just remember that family relationships are more important than money. Where was that philosophy 2 weeks ago when you all assumed I'd inherit nothing? He didn't have an answer for that. Madison has been the most persistent. She's called every single day, sometimes multiple times. Her strategy seems to be wearing me down with constant contact and fake sisterly concern. I miss you, she said during yesterday's call. We used to be so close. This was complete revisionist history. Madison and I had barely spoken in the past 2 years, except when family events forced us into the same room. I'm worried you're isolating yourself, she continued. It's not healthy to cut yourself off from family. You mean it's not healthy for me to have boundaries with people who treated me terribly? We never treated you terribly. We're family. Families tease each other. You literally tried to prevent me from attending Eleanor's will reading because you thought I was too much of a failure to inherit anything important. Long pause. That was a misunderstanding. No, Madison. That was you showing me exactly what you think of me. But the real breakthrough came 3 days ago when I was contacted by a music industry executive named Sarah Chen. Apparently, word had gotten out in certain circles that someone had inherited Eleanor Patterson's legendary collection of vintage recording equipment. Ms. Patterson was something of a legend among audio equipment collectors, Sarah explained during our phone call. The studio she built is incredibly well designed, and some of the equipment she acquired is irreplaceable. We'd be interested in discussing a partnership arrangement. It turns out Sarah works for a major record label, and they'd been looking for a high-end recording space outside the city for their artists to use for longer projects. She wanted to know if I'd be interested in renting studio time to professional artists. We typically pay $2,000 to $5,000 per day for studios of this caliber, she said. I almost dropped the phone. At those rates, I could make more in a month than I used to make in a year, just renting out the studio I'd inherited. But Sarah had an even better offer. Based on what I've heard about your production work, we'd also be interested in having you serve as the in-house producer for artists who book time at your studio. If you're interested, we could start with a trial arrangement. In-house producer for major label artists, using my own studio, getting paid professional rates. This wasn't just financial security. This was the career I'd been dreaming of my entire life, handed to me on a silver platter. We scheduled a meeting for next week. That night, I sat in Eleanor's music room, my music room, and played piano for the first time since she'd died. I played the same classical pieces she'd taught me when I was younger, pieces my family had always dismissed as useless knowledge. As I played, I thought about everything that had changed in 2 weeks. I'd gone from being the family disappointment to being a millionaire with a professional music career opportunity, all because one person in my family had believed in me enough to invest in my dreams. My phone rang while I was playing. It was my dad. Son, we need to have a serious conversation about this inheritance situation. What about it? You're being selfish. Eleanor left you that money expecting you to share it with the family. I stopped playing piano. Did she tell you that? She didn't have to tell me. It's obvious. Actually, it's not obvious at all. She left specific amounts to specific people. If she'd wanted you to have more, she would have left you more. Don't be naive, he said, his voice getting angry. She left you the bulk of the estate because she thought you needed the most help, not because she thought you deserved the most reward. That stung, but I pushed back. Even if that were true, why would that change anything? She made her decision. Because it's not fair to the rest of us who actually contributed to this family. Contributed how? By making me feel worthless my entire life? We pushed you because we wanted you to succeed. You pushed me away because you were embarrassed by me. Long silence. Your mother is heartbroken, he finally said. She can't sleep at night knowing her son has turned against his own family. I haven't turned against anyone. I'm just not pretending that the past 24 years didn't happen. So what do you want? An apology? The way he said it made it clear he thought that would be ridiculous. I want you to leave me alone, I said, and hung up. But here's the thing. I wasn't angry anymore. For the first time in years, I felt completely at peace. I had everything I needed to build the life I wanted, and I didn't need their approval or support to do it. I went back to playing piano, and for the first time since Eleanor's death, I felt her presence in the room. Not in a spooky way, but in the sense that I could feel her approval, her pride in what I was becoming. Tomorrow, I'm meeting with Sarah Chen to discuss the recording studio partnership. Next week, I'm scheduled to have my first session with a professional artist. My family keeps calling, but I've stopped answering. They made their choice when they tried to exclude me from Eleanor's will reading. Now I'm making mine. Update 2. Holy shit, you guys. I don't even know where to start with what's happened over the past month. Remember that meeting with Sarah Chen from the record label? Well, that changed everything. Sarah came to see the studio 3 weeks ago, and her reaction was incredible. She walked into the basement, looked around at all the equipment, and just said, wow, for about 30 seconds straight. This is better than most professional studios in the city, she told me. Eleanor really knew what she was doing. We spent 2 hours going through all the equipment, and Sarah was genuinely impressed with the setup. But what really surprised her was when I played some of the tracks I'd been working on since moving into the house. This production style is exactly what we've been been looking for, she said after listening to 3 of my songs. Would you be interested in producing an album for one of our emerging artists? Would I be interested? I tried to play it cool, but inside I was freaking out. The artist turned out to be this 22-year-old singer-songwriter named Zoe, who'd been trying to find the right producer for her debut album. Sarah brought her by the following week, and we immediately clicked creatively. Your sound is so unique, Zoe told me after our first session. It's like you're able to capture emotions I didn't even know I was feeling. We've been working together for 3 weeks now, and it's been the most fulfilling creative experience of my life. Zoe is incredibly talented, and having access to Eleanor's equipment has allowed me to produce tracks that sound absolutely professional. But here's the crazy part. Word has spread incredibly fast in the music industry. Apparently, good producers with their own high-end studios are rare, especially ones outside the city where artists can focus without distractions. I've had inquiries from 5 other artists in the past 2 weeks. Sarah's label wants to book my studio for 3 more projects over the next 6 months at $3,000 per day plus producer fees. I did the math, and if this keeps up, I'll be making more money than Tyler makes as a lawyer. Meanwhile, my family's reaction to my success has been interesting. It started when Madison saw a photo on Instagram that Zoe had posted from the studio. One of her followers commented asking where it was taken, and Zoe mentioned my name and the studio. Madison immediately called me. I saw that you're working with some singer. Is this a real thing, or just another one of your projects? The dismissiveness in her voice was familiar, but this time it didn't bother me. It's a real thing, I told her. She's signed to a major label. Long pause. How much are they paying you? Enough. I mean, that's great that you're getting some recognition, she said, but I could hear the forced enthusiasm. Maybe now you can start thinking about investing some of your inheritance more wisely. This has become their new angle. Now that it's becoming obvious that I might actually be successful, they've shifted from "you don't deserve the inheritance" to "you should use the inheritance to benefit the whole family." Tyler called a few days later with a business proposition. I've been thinking about your studio situation, he said. You could probably increase your profits significantly with the right business management. I'm doing fine managing it myself. But are you maximizing your potential? Are you handling the contracts properly? What about tax implications? When I didn't immediately respond, he continued. I could take over the business side of things, handle negotiations, contracts, financial planning. We could be partners. Partners in what sense? I'd take a percentage of the revenue in exchange for handling all the business aspects. You could focus on the creative work. I almost laughed. Tyler, 3 weeks ago you told me that my music hobby wasn't a real business. Now you want to be my business partner? That was before I realized the scope of what you're doing. The scope hasn't changed. The only thing that's changed is your perception of whether it's profitable. He got quiet. Look, I'm trying to help you here. By taking a percentage of my income, by providing professional services that you need. Thanks, but no thanks. But Tyler wasn't done. The next day, he showed up at my house with Dad. We need to talk, Dad announced when I opened the door. They came in without being invited and sat down in Eleanor's living room like they owned the place. Son, we're concerned about you, Dad began. Concerned how? Tyler jumped in. You're making business decisions without proper guidance. You're going to get taken advantage of. By who? By these music industry people, Dad said. They're probably paying you a fraction of what your studio time is actually worth. This was rich, coming from people who'd spent years telling me my music wasn't worth anything at all. I'm being paid fairly, I told them. How do you know? Tyler pressed. Have you researched comparable studio rates? Have you had lawyers review your contracts? Tyler, you're a corporate lawyer. You don't know anything about the music industry. Business is business. Dad leaned forward. The point is, you're sitting on valuable assets that could benefit the entire family if managed correctly. Benefit how? We could form a family investment company, Tyler said, pulling out more legal documents. Pool our resources, make strategic decisions together. You mean pool my resources and let you make decisions about them. We mean create a situation where everyone benefits from Eleanor's generosity instead of just one person. I looked at these 2 men sitting in my living room, trying to convince me to share my inheritance with the same people who'd tried to exclude me from receiving it. No, I said simply. No to what? Dad asked. No to all of it. No to your business partnership. No to your family investment company. No to any arrangement where you get to control assets that Eleanor specifically left to me. Tyler's mask slipped. You're being incredibly selfish. Am I? Or am I just not giving you access to money that was never yours to begin with? Dad stood up, his face getting red. Eleanor would be ashamed of what you're becoming. That hit a nerve. What am I becoming? Greedy? Selfish? Ungrateful? Ungrateful for what? For a lifetime of being treated like I was worthless? We never treated you like you were worthless. I walked over to Eleanor's piano and picked up the folder of photos that Mr. Hendricks had shown us during the will reading. Eleanor documented our relationship for 2 years, I said, flipping through the pictures. You know what's not in any of these photos? Any of you. You know why? Because none of you ever visited her unless you wanted something. I found the photo I was looking for. Me and Eleanor in her garden, both of us laughing at something. She took this picture the day I helped her plant her vegetable garden. It was a Saturday in April. You know where you were that day, Dad? Playing golf. And Tyler, you were at some law school networking event. Madison was at a spa weekend with her friends. I kept flipping through the photos. Here's me helping her fix her computer. Here's me cooking dinner for her when she was getting over the flu. Here's me just sitting with her on her porch, talking. I closed the folder and looked at both of them. Eleanor left left me her estate because I was the only person in this family who treated her like family, not because she felt sorry for me, not because she was confused, because I earned it. Tyler and Dad exchanged glances. Fine, Dad said. Keep your money, but don't expect this family to be here for you when you need us. When have you ever been there for me when I needed you? They left without answering. That evening, I had my most productive studio session yet. Zoe and I finished 3 tracks that we're both incredibly proud of. She started posting behind-the-scenes content on social media, and the response from her fans has been amazing. You've helped me find my sound, she told me as we were wrapping up. I've worked with other producers before, but nobody has understood my vision the way you do. After she left, I sat in the studio and realized something. I was happier than I'd been in years, maybe ever. I had meaningful work, financial security, creative fulfillment, and complete autonomy over my life. My phone buzzed with a text from Madison. Mom cried for 2 hours after Dad told her about your conversation. Is this really what you want? I stared at the message for a long time before responding. I want what I've always wanted. To be accepted for who I am instead of criticized for who I'm not. She didn't text back. 2 days later, Sarah Chen called with incredible news. Zoe's preliminary tracks are testing really well with focus groups, she told me. The label wants to fast-track her album release, and they want to book your studio for 2 more artists immediately. Which artists? She named 2 singers I'd actually heard of. Not megastars, but legitimate recording artists with actual careers. The word is spreading that you're the real deal, Sarah continued. There's something special about the combination of your production style and that studio space. Artists are saying it brings out their best work. I scheduled the new sessions and hung up the phone in disbelief. 6 months ago, I was struggling to pay rent on my tiny apartment. Now I was becoming a sought-after producer with a waiting list of professional artists. That night, I called Marcus to catch him up on everything. Dude, this sounds like a movie, he said after I finished explaining the family drama and career developments. I keep waiting for something to go wrong, I admitted. Why would something go wrong? You're talented, you're working hard, and you finally have the resources to succeed. This is what's supposed to happen. He was right. For the first time in my life, my circumstances matched my ambitions. Later that evening, I found another letter from Eleanor that I'd somehow missed. It was tucked inside one of her piano books. My dear nephew, it began. If you're reading this, it means you found your place in the music room. I hope you can feel how proud I am of you. I want you to know that leaving you my estate wasn't an act of charity or sympathy. It was an investment in talent and character. You have both in abundance. Your family doesn't understand you because they measure success by conventional standards. But the most beautiful things in life, music, art, love, kindness, can't be measured that way. Never let anyone convince you that following your passion is selfish. The world needs more people who create beauty, and you do that every day. Build the life you've dreamed of. You deserve it. All my love, Aunt Eleanor. I folded the letter carefully and put it in my wallet. Tomorrow, I start recording with my second major label artist. Next month, Sarah wants to discuss a longer-term partnership that could establish my studio as a premier recording destination. My family is still calling, but their tone has changed. Now they want to work things out and rebuild our relationship. Now they want to support my career and be part of my success. But here's what I've realized. I don't need their support anymore. For the first time in my life, I have everything I need to be happy, successful, and fulfilled. And it feels absolutely incredible. Final update. It's been 6 months since Eleanor's will reading, and I honestly don't recognize my life anymore. Everything has changed so dramatically that I sometimes have to pinch myself to make sure I'm not dreaming. The recording studio has become incredibly successful. I'm booked solid through the end of the year, and I have a waiting list of artists who want to work with me. Sarah Chen's label has essentially made me their go-to producer for emerging artists, and 3 of the albums I've produced have been picked up for major distribution deals. But the biggest news came 2 weeks ago. One of the songs I produced for Zoe just hit number 15 on the Billboard Hot 100. Number 15 on the actual Billboard chart. The song is called Found My Voice, and it's about overcoming people who tried to silence you. Zoe wrote it after hearing my story about my family, and when we recorded it, we both knew it was special. But neither of us expected it to blow up like this. The success has been surreal. I've been interviewed by music industry publications. Rolling Stone mentioned me in an article about producers to watch. My Instagram followers have gone from about 200 to over 50,000 in 2 weeks. More importantly, the financial success has been incredible. Between studio rentals, production fees, and now royalties from successful tracks, I'm making more money than I ever imagined possible. I'm not just financially stable, I'm wealthy in my own right. Which brings me to my family. Remember how they were barely speaking to me 6 months ago? How they tried to exclude me from Eleanor's will reading because they assumed I was too much of a failure to inherit anything important? Well, now they want to be best friends. It started when Found My Voice first started climbing the charts. Madison saw it mentioned in some entertainment blog and immediately called me. "Oh my God, is this you?" she asked, all excited. "My brother produced a song that's on the Billboard chart?" The enthusiasm was so fake, it was painful. "Yeah, that's me. This is incredible. I'm so proud of you. I always knew you had talent." This was the same person who'd called my music computer sounds 6 months earlier. "I've been telling everyone at work about my brother, the famous producer," she continued. "Famous is a stretch. Don't be modest. This is huge. We should celebrate." Tyler called the next day with similar energy. Suddenly, he wanted to hear all about my career. career, wanted to understand the music industry, wanted to support my success in any way possible. I've been thinking, he said during our conversation, maybe I was too quick to dismiss what you were doing. I didn't understand the potential of the music industry. What changed your mind? Seeing your success. I mean, you're making real money now, building a real business. This is impressive stuff. The conditional nature of his approval was so obvious, it was insulting. He only respected my work now that it was profitable. But the most dramatic change was in my parents. Mom started sending me care packages, homemade cookies, articles about the music industry she'd printed from the internet, little notes saying how proud she was of me. The same woman who'd spent years asking when I was going to get a real job was now bragging to her friends about her son, the record producer. Dad was more direct. He showed up at my house 2 weeks ago, the first time he'd visited since that argument about the family investment company. Son, I owe you an apology, he said when I opened the door. This was shocking. My father had never apologized to me for anything in my entire life. I didn't understand what you were building, he continued as we sat in Eleanor's living room. I thought you were just playing around with music as a hobby. I didn't realize you were developing a real skill. The skill was always there, I pointed out. You just didn't think it was valuable. He nodded, looking genuinely ashamed. You're right. I measured your worth by conventional standards, and that was wrong of me. It was the closest thing to a real apology I'd ever gotten from him. I want to make things right between us, he said. I want to be the father I should have been all along. Part of me wanted to forgive him immediately. This was what I'd wanted to hear my entire life, but another part of me remembered how it felt to sit alone on the other side of that conference table while they all clustered together, convinced I didn't belong there. Where was this support when I needed it? I asked. I was wrong then. I'm trying to be right now. It's easy to be supportive when someone is successful. The hard part is being supportive when they're struggling. He didn't have a good answer for that, but the most manipulative approach came from the extended family. Uncle Robert, who'd made that comment about complex adult matters at the will reading, suddenly wanted to reconnect. I've been following your career online, he told me during a phone call. Incredible stuff. You've really made something of yourself. Thanks. Listen, I've been thinking about that day at the lawyer's office. I think there might have been some misunderstandings. What kind of misunderstandings? Well, we were all emotional about Eleanor's death. Maybe we didn't handle things as well as we could have. This was the closest anyone had come to acknowledging how badly they'd treated me. The thing is, he continued, now that you're successful, it would mean a lot to the family if we could all move past this awkwardness. Move past it how? Maybe have a family dinner? Get everyone together to celebrate your success? I almost laughed. They wanted to throw me a party now that I was successful. Where was the party when I was struggling? Where was the family support when I needed it? But the real test came last week. Tyler called with what he presented as exciting news. I've been talking to some colleagues about your situation, he said, and we think there might be some interesting business opportunities for you. What kind of opportunities? Investment opportunities. Ways to leverage your current success into bigger ventures. Here it was. The real reason for all the renewed interest in my life. You could expand, he continued. Maybe open studios in other cities. Maybe start a record label. But you'd need partners with business experience to make it work. Partners like you, partners like us, the family. We could all benefit from your success. There it was. They didn't want to celebrate my success. They wanted to monetize it. Tyler, when you found out I inherited Eleanor's estate, your first reaction was to assume I didn't deserve it. When you found out how much it was worth, you tried to get me to share it with everyone else. Now that I'm successful in my own right, you want to be my business partner. Do you see the pattern here? Long pause. I'm trying to help you grow your business. You're trying to get access to my money. That's not fair, isn't it? 6 months ago, you were ashamed to have me as a brother. Now you want to be my partner. What changed? Your success changed. Exactly. My success changed. Not your opinion of who I am as a person. You still don't respect me. You just respect my bank account. He tried to argue, but I'd already made up my mind. Here's what I've realized over the past 6 months. My family's love has always been conditional. They only supported me when I was successful by their standards. They only included me when I had something they wanted. They only respected me when I was profitable. But Eleanor's love was different. She believed in me when I had nothing to offer except myself. She invested in my dreams when everyone else saw them as delusions. She left me her estate not because she pitied me, but because she valued who I was as a person. That's the difference between real love and transactional relationships. Last night, I made a decision. I'm hosting a family dinner this weekend. Everyone's invited. Parents, siblings, extended family, everyone who tried to exclude me from Eleanor's will reading. But this isn't going to be a reconciliation dinner. This is going to be a reckoning. I'm going to tell them exactly what I think of their sudden change of heart. I'm going to explain why their conditional love isn't worth anything to me. And I'm going to make it clear that while I'm willing to be civil at family events, I'm not interested in pretending that the past 6 months have erased 24 years of being treated like I was worthless. They wanted a successful family member they could be proud of. Well, they got one. But success has taught me something they probably didn't expect. I don't need their approval anymore. The dinner is tomorrow night. I'll let you know how it goes. But first, I have to get back to work. I'm producing an album for an artist who just got signed to a major label, and we're trying to finish before her tour starts next month. 6 months ago, I was the family disappointment. Now I'm living my dream life, making more money than I ever thought possible, and working with incredibly talented artists who respect my abilities. Eleanor was right. I was never the family disappointment. I was the family treasure who was never properly valued. valued. But now I know my worth, and it has nothing to do with what they think of me. Post-dinner update. Well, that was something. The family dinner happened last night, and it went exactly like I thought it would, but also completely differently than I expected. Everyone showed up. Mom, Dad, Madison, Tyler, Uncle Robert, Aunt Linda, cousins Jennifer and Mike, even my grandmother. They all came dressed up like it was a celebration, carrying flowers and wine and acting like we were gathering to toast my success. I'd spent all day preparing what I was going to say to them. I had this whole speech planned about conditional love and transactional relationships and how their sudden change of attitude didn't erase decades of making me feel worthless. But when they all walked into Eleanor's dining room and sat around her antique table, something unexpected happened. I looked at these people, and I didn't feel angry anymore. I felt sorry for them. Here they were, trying so hard to insert themselves into a success story they'd had no part in creating, desperately attempting to rewrite history so they could claim some credit for who I'd become. And it was just pathetic. Dad stood up to make a toast. To our son, who's shown us all what determination and talent can accomplish. Everyone raised their glasses and smiled at me expectantly. Actually, I said, staying seated, before we toast anything, I want to say something. The room got quiet. 6 months ago, you all sat in a lawyer's office and tried to exclude me from Eleanor's will reading because you assumed I was too much of a failure to inherit anything meaningful. Madison started to interrupt, but I kept talking. Tyler literally told me that Eleanor probably left me a few $100s or something small, and that it would be embarrassing for me to sit through legal proceedings discussing complex adult matters. Tyler's face went red. Dad, you said Eleanor was a practical woman who wouldn't leave valuable assets to someone who dropped out of college to play with computers. Dad stared at his plate. Madison, you filmed me at that meeting because you thought it was funny to document the family failure getting put in his place. That's not what, Madison began. And now, I continued, now that it turns out I inherited $2.7 million and built a successful career, suddenly you all want to be supportive family members. The silence was deafening. The question is, where was this support when I actually needed it? My grandmother, who'd been quiet this whole time, suddenly spoke up. We made mistakes, she said quietly. We all made mistakes. I looked at her. This woman who'd raised me to believe I was the family disappointment. Grandma, do you remember what you told me when I was 16 and won that regional music competition? She shook her head. You said, that's nice, dear, but when are you going to do something useful? Her face crumpled. Do you remember what you said when I told you I was dropping out of college to focus on music production? No. You said, we should have stopped at 2 grandchildren. Uncle Robert cleared his throat. Look, we all said things we didn't mean, but you did mean them, I interrupted. That's the problem. You meant every dismissive comment, every eye roll, every time you changed the subject when someone asked about my life. You meant it when you assumed I'd never amount to anything. I stood up and looked around the table. The only person in this family who believed in me was Eleanor. She's the one who invested in my dreams when everyone else saw them as delusions. She's the one who built me a professional recording studio while you were all making jokes about my computer sounds. We didn't know, Mom started. You didn't know because you never bothered to learn. In 2 years of visiting Eleanor, not one of you ever asked what we talked about or what I was working on. You